you.
That's how you do it?
From wastelanding hoarders that have a fine ear for classical swing tunes, to Vikings that devour cheese wheels whole and fuck dragons. Welcome all you beautiful ladies and animals, as today I compare some of the most popular and recognizable faces across the Bethesda RPGs with the grimdark universe of Warhammer 40k. Now, like with a lot of these other videos, Warhammer is kind of the constant, so I'm not going to go super deep on the explanations of things Warhammer-wise outside of the context needed for them in the video. And for the other side, we'll be getting into them a bit briefly before comparing these forthrightfully. Now yes, right out of the gate, none of these characters have the kind of insanity that Ben 10 or Doctor Who or Popeye that would see them dominating the Warhammer universe, so instead we're taking a handful of specific Warhammer analogs and comparing them to the protagonists. The Dragonborn of Skyrim, eating the souls of dying beasts and shouting horses off the mountains. The sole survivor of the Commonwealth, hoarding duct tape and turning settlers into slaves. And the Starborn. Before we get started, if you like this and want even more, be sure to like the video or subscribe to the channel so you don't miss anything else. And if you want to keep the conversation going, there's also a Discord link down in the description that you can join for free and chat with all sorts of like-minded nerds. First off, I want to set a general guideline for us. As all of the protagonists are characters in video games, they are unilaterally overpowered. Now, we're going to go with the Warhammer route of choosing the line between embellishment and realism. Because no matter how many game logics you stack up, I don't think Nate is tanking mini-nukes to the face, even if you can in-game. As a general middle ground, we're going to be using what these characters defeat as a general comparison, but still continue with the understanding that someone like the Sole Survivor, while deadly, charming, and a fantastic shot, is still human. But with that, let's just dive right into it. Now, for the widowed parent who uses duct tape and loose screws to build automatic turrets, the Sole Survivor would fit right in around the gangs and raiders of the Necromunda Underhive. Necromunda, however you say it. The real question is, do they climb the heap and become the king of the Underhive, or get torn apart by psychos in the sludge? Now, first off, Necromunda is not a faction or a character in 40k, but rather a very special place. There's a lot of special underhives in the world of 40k, cities beneath another city, run by gangsters and mobsters doing whatever they want, as long as the suits up top don't get ticked off enough to come down and dole out the Imperium's wrath. Now, Necromunda is special because it's one of the largest, most dangerous and violent underhives we know of. When the flagrant dumpster divers are the regular humans around, you know shit is fucked, because between warrior women and a clan of roided out meatheads that aren't quite ogre but get dangerously close, Necromunda demands a lot from the people trying to survive down in its depths. I'm realizing I'm going to be saying both versions of Necromunda throughout this. Just deal with it. But it's also not like the Sole Survivor is inexperienced here. At Nuka World, they got a series of psychos to bow under their will, creating a new world and effectively a small nation of raiders by offering favors, if not straight beating the clans into submission.
Be a good dog and do what you're told, or you'll be put down.
Oh there, boss. Not in front of my guys, alright?
So this is just more of that, but up to 11. Nuka World, but replace the animals with a gang made up exclusively of Frank Horrigans. But going toe-to-toe with a stim-jacked Goliath gang boss, or getting cornered by the techno-cultists of Van Saar, is a very different problem than yelling at some raiders in leather jackets. Very much like in Nuka World, the way the survivor approaches each gang will dramatically change the outlook on everything that comes after. For Goliath, they have to come with raw power. With the techies, they might want to try to do some bartering. For the psychos, maybe a little focused calling would be the best approach. There's also going to be a big difference in gear. Sometimes the Sole Survivor wields a Fat Man, a handheld nuclear launcher. Sometimes it's a 9mm pistol with a silencer on it. Sometimes they're decked head to toe in power armor. But also, Fallout power armor is not that strong, at least in comparison to 40k. It's able to scoff at small arms fire and especially durable against laser weaponry, but anything more than a 45 is putting a decent dent in it, if not tearing through the steel of even a T-51 suit. The real advantage to power armor is that it's like a wearable forklift. You can shoot the tank on a forklift real easy. Yeah, it's not super built for warfare, but it means that one person could do more than 10 easily. Power armor is the same. Rather than needing a team of 2 or 3 soldiers to mount and fire miniguns or heavier ordnance, slap one private in their armor and let it rip, having them rely on overwhelming firepower rather than defensive or tactical superiority. And when you're up against regular humans, that's fantastic. And extra thankfully, nobody in Necromunda is normally as well equipped as your standard Astartes. Lasguns, autoguns, shotguns, and a few other specialties may prove difficult to withstand, but the sole survivor isn't having to worry about bolter fire or grav guns, anything crazy like that. Add on top of that, the survivor's seemingly unique aptitude towards building settlements that draw in new members and elicit a positive reaction from other wastelanders. It's possible that rather than fighting the other gangs of the Underhive, they'd simply begin to build their own, recruiting from all the others and carrying out a massive plot of land for themselves, slowly taking over the entire Underhive until no one can stand in their way. Like many of these matchups, it's kind of very plot dependent on how the sole survivor acts. Are they super brash and stupid? Are they an idiot savant? Or somebody who's really smart and tactical and able to basically outwit all of the gangers in Necromunda? But I'm going to go to the description for this one. Let me know in the comments if you think the sole survivor, Nate, Nora, whatever it is, would be able to stand up to Necromunda, make their own gang, or just kind of get wiped out. Based on everything we see, especially with something like power armor, I think their chances are a lot better than not. Obviously, of course, if anything like a Inquisitor in power armor or an Astartes comes to say hello, is kind of fucked. But with that, let's move on. Now, I know nobody has paid any attention to Starfield since it came out, but as a fun little experiment, let's see how the space adventuring hero would do if they happened across the space pirates of 40k, the rogue traders. Now, the strength of traders can volley around a lot, from dinky space cruisers manned by a handful of men to vast empires of warships that could fire upon multiple fleets of Astartes at once and seemingly walk away unscathed. This did happen during the Horus Heresy, by the way. Rogue traders showed up, fired upon 2 Astartes fleets effectively at full power, and kind of just went on with their day. For today, though, we're going to be aiming more down the middle. The rogue traders with an impressive but singular warship. Now, the traders themselves are normally just special people with very wonderful permits that allow them to do basically whatever they want. Recruit Xenos, Space Marines, raise armies, as long as it can be excused as in the Imperium's favor, they can make the right deals, and if no Inquisitor squints too hard in their direction, the rogue traders don't really answer to anyone. That being said, they are still humans. Humans in 40k with maybe psychic abilities, cybernetic augments, and entourages of either Space Marines, various Xenos, and other soldiers, but still human. Now, the Starborn, the divine explorers connected to the fabric of reality, are also human, shootable, killable, but functionally immortal, jumping from one universe to an infinite number of others as they go. How it works exactly, we don't know. Starfield, as an IP, is fairly new and there's a lot of light lore around it. Perhaps they're moved to another universe just before death, the mechanic of dying in-game reflected as an in-universe ability. Maybe any other 100 of multiversal theories could apply. All we know for sure is that the Starborn is connected to the fabrics of space-time and will reappear in another nearly identical universe when defeated, meaning they can never truly die. The closest to this is like the Chaos Gods in 40k, where if you were somehow able to kill them, they would still exist in something like Age of Sigmar. Starborn works in a lot of the same ways. So, from the most basic technical standpoint, unless this is known and the Starborn is kept alive in a form of torture forever, right out the gate they can't technically lose, but instead quick save and launch endless attacks until they come out on top. Mathematically, the odds are just in their favor. But even if they had just one attempt, how would it go? To challenge a rogue trader, first they'd have to be enemies. For the Starborn, or Starfarer, the Starfield protagonist, there's a lot of stars, their ultimate goal is finding the artifacts that lead them to the Unity and allow them to become Starborn. So them teaming up with a spacefaring trader who probably would also have interest in bringing the Unity back to the Imperium is more likely than not, unless for some reason the Starborn had some issue with the Imperium's tactics, but they come from an RPG. Morals are flexible here. Ignore the fact that, like, all the companions force you to be a good guy, but aside from that. Now, let's say they are enemies. The Starborn has to find a way onto the rogue trader's warship and battle their way through to the captain. Through Psykers, Astartes, maybe an Eldar or two, some Votan, or even Tau, and don't forget the small private army. Now, we know the Starborn is human and at base level has some mystical connections to reality, but could they chew through a small armed force? Well, they do have some funky space powers. Just running down the list, they can create a space of anti-gravity, launching a wave of gravitational energy ahead of them, dashing with gravitational energy, precognition, pacifying all creatures around them, resurrecting aliens to make them fight alongside the Starborn, summoning a version of themselves from an alternate dimension, exploding with the force of a supernova, drain life from another creature and heal themselves with it, force an enemy to confront their literal demons, summoning a multiversal version of an enemy to fight themselves, remove all the oxygen from an area while creating a personal atmosphere around themselves, slowing the speed of time around you, and like a particle beam from their face like they're Superman. Basically, space Dovahkiin. Now, these are incredibly busted powers even by 40k standards, with only some Eldar and Psykers even able to resist, if barely fight back. Doesn't matter how strong the Psyker is if the air is sucked from their lungs and they're blasted with a local supernova, or just facing an evil, bizarro version of themselves who's just gonna blast them right back. And all these powers have no connection to the warp, so while the Eldar fear Slaanesh grabbing their souls and the Psykers have to control themselves, the Starborn can kind of just let this one rip one after another. Now, if they really suck at fighting, sure, it doesn't matter how strong your ability to lob supernovas is if you just get shot, but you'd have to shoot them first. And the standard kit of a Starborn could easily be a particle rifle with air superiority in the form of a jetpack. They have a small army to get through, but aside from one or two challengers that aren't even the traitor themselves, the Starborn does have the wackiness of video game protagonist in their corner, helping them chew through a few hundred, if not 1,000, regular guardsmen with laser rifles, melting their flesh with supernova bombs or suffocating an entire room before doing even more. And again, that's by nerfing the Starborn to a single run. Mathematically, they couldn't lose. But okay, the Starborn works on wacky sci-fi video game bullshit. Alright, let's stack the deck in the trader's favor. The rogue trader commands a fleet of 20 warships, half a company of Deathwatch, and the aid of Eldar, Necron, and Orcs alike, somehow setting aside their differences for this one battle. They know the Starborn is coming, and they prepare accordingly. What can the Starborn do then? Well, they do have a logistical advantage. See, the ships in Starfield and Warhammer have one major difference: speed. In Warhammer, warships are a lot like the naval vessels of the 17th century, with rogue traders reflecting a sort of sci-fi variant on the traders who worked for the East India Company. They're massive, dangerous warships, but flying through the warp is hard and can take months, if not years, meaning ships are lost at sea or damaged in the process. For the Starborn, spaceflight is instant. 1 minute they're orbiting Earth, the next they're hanging around Alpha Centauri. Even though the Starborn ship is infinitely smaller and weaker by every metric, Their ability to outspeed nearly everything in the 40k galaxy and dart around from place to place would make the Starborn a very special type of rogue trader all within themselves. They end up becoming the thing they're fighting, but better. In a matter of years, it wouldn't be sci-fi soldier versus a small army, but fleet versus fleet. Just so happens that the leader of one fleet is also a demigod and gets an infinite number of chances of retrying each time they fail. I'll be honest, this matchup was one I only really made because both the Dragonborn and Russ have the Viking thing going on. I initially wanted to do something for the dragons in Age of Sigmar, because, it's still Warhammer, but AOS is so sparse on lore compared to 40k that it felt like I'd basically be guessing. And the dragons of 40k get taken out by unarmored space marines, so comparing them to a demigod who eats dragon souls felt a little weak. Now, first up, the Dragonborn is the only protagonist that doesn't have to be human. Opting for Lizard, Khajiit, or Elf, and then landing on Fenris would probably see the Herald of Skyrim shot on sight. Now, if human in their origin, the Dragonborn may be seen as another child of the Space Wolf's homeworld, and with powers derived from their godly heritage, the Dragonborn would fit right in with the Rune Priests, their powers and shouts a gift from the gods rather than psychic ability. Obviously, with how physically adept the Dragonborn is, them, if choosing to do so, becoming an Astartes that blows away greater demons with their voice is not out of the question. A space marine who could stall time with a whisper, run greater than reality should allow, and devour the souls of dragons if they ever make a detour to Nocturne. With the rampant devouring of cheese wheels by the pound and wine by the gallons, the Dragonborn would fit right in alongside the Space Wolves and actually become a hero of their chapter. Already prophetic with martial weapons before being given a gun, the Dragonborn wielding power armor and a bolter would be disastrous for anyone that goes against them. Like a super ultra powerful stealth archer build. And while the idea of that is very cool, that's not what we came here for. So, whether Astartes are simply adorned with their regular armor, could the one they fear wrestle with the blade of Fenris? As they are, with skills maxed to the gills, and literally a master of all forms of combat in the lands of Tamriel, the Dragonborn could challenge most, if not all, mortal fighters to a duel and walk out without a scratch. So dexterous they could steal the clothes off your back without you knowing. So sneaky you'd lose sight of them while making eye contact. And so strong that the heaviest of armors feel like nothing more than a second skin to them. With a spoken word, they can drag time to a crawl, force others to bend beneath their voice, and send most creatures flying. Another shout makes them invulnerable to damage for a short time. They can make their enemies disarm themselves, instill fear in them, breathe fire and ice. In short, a lot of fuck-ass crazy things. The biggest issue with the Dragonborn against Leman Russ is that their equipment is quite literally outdated. No matter their strength, I'm not sure any of the regular weapons in Skyrim could hold up to Ceramite. Or so you'd think, because the Dovahkiin also has Daedric armor. In the lands of Tamriel, this is often made of ebony, said to be the toughest material in the lands when forged correctly. A type of ceramic glass made from the blood of gods, not dissimilar from ceramite steel, but even further infused with the soul of a demon, the Daedra. Think of a space marine having their ceramite steel infused with a warp demon to make them stronger, but rather than being possessed by said demon, the last Dragonborn is trapping the demon within said armor and forcing it to protect themselves. And same goes for their weapons, magical demon-infused equipment forged for one purpose, violence, and they are compelled to follow that order. Now, comparing one made-up armor to another fantastical god blood armor is a fool's task. We just have no frame of reference, nor enough reference for how strong these would be in comparison. But since they're both magically enhanced and feature ceramic qualities, we'll call it even. But the more important question will be less about armor and equipment then, and more to the effects of skills. Leman Russ, who freezes those that stand around him, who went blow for blow with Magnus and even Horus Lupercal, who beheaded a Titan and can slay Astartes with ease, the Emperor's executioner. And the last Dragonborn, a dragon soul within the body of a human, killing the World Eater Alduin, an aspect of death, a timeless and immortal Dova who cannot be slain except by another exceptionally powerful dragon soul, which is what allows the Dovahkiin to take him on to begin with. Dragons in Elder Scrolls are not that different from Warhammer's demon princes. Timeless, deathless beings inherently tied to reality. So as a rough kind of analog, imagine a human with the soul of a demon who carries the ability to permanently kill demons, then tracking down the oldest and most powerful of all these timeless demons and ending them. That's the Warhammer equivalent to the Dragonborn story. Now, you might think that this gives Leman a leg up because of his anti-warp aura that even made Magnus struggle to hold eye contact, but no. While the mechanics are similar, dragons do not come from the warp. The magic that the Dragonborn calls upon is not psychic or derived from the warp, in which Leman is able to shut away. So magically speaking, the two are on fairly equal levels, if not the Dragonborn squeaking way ahead with shouts that change reality and conjurations that can't be shut off by Russ's mental tricks. And the only abilities Russ brings are all ice-based, the kind of elemental powers that the snow-faring Dragonborn could shrug off if not use themselves, with a similar frost breath to use right in return. Speed and combat ability is going to determine the biggest gap between these two. And truthfully, we're comparing an overpowered video game protagonist to an overpowered Primarch. Russ, who is said to move so fast he leaves an afterimage. The Dragonborn, who can move faster than anything the Nords of Skyrim have ever seen, and then doubly so can slow time down with their words, bringing even Russ to a halt. And that, to be honest, seems to be the most useful ability in the Battle of Blades we have before us. If Leman is outsped by a magic user who isn't dependent on the warp, he's walking into a fight with the most powerful demon prince of dragonkind, and may not be walking out. I could really see this one going either way and find it really hard to be convinced one way or the other, so let me know down below who you think is going to be walking out with the victory on this one in the comments. Maybe we settle this by democratic vote, just one word. Dovahkiin or Leman Russ. 2 words, but you know what I mean. Personally, I just feel like stopping time and stabbing Russ through the skull with a blade that had a demon forced into it and wants nothing to do but kill would actually put the Dragonborn on top. But that's gonna draw our Bethesda comparison to a close. Let me know what you thought down below, what or who you would like to see next, and subscribe so you don't miss it. The only ones to protect managed democracy across the galaxy and beyond, standing between you and the evil forces of fascism, giving nothing more than their patriotism and lives. The Helldivers versus the Emperor's Angels, the Astartes. Now, this is not your ordinary what if thing A fought thing B style video. In fact, it's not even the first time I've covered Helldivers in 40k going at each other. Although the first time was mainly just comparing Helldivers singularly to Astartes, disregarding the mountains of ordnance and supercarriers that help them enforce managed democracy. Today, we'll be doing a little bit of the traditional death battle comparisons, but mostly, we're going to look at what the integration of Super Earth might mean for humanity in the grimdark future, if they would even get integrated at all. But before we get started, I want to give a quick shout out to all my beautiful members and patrons so you can join in the fight for democracy for just $1 a month. If you'd like to know more, hang around till the end of the video. Without further ado, let's just jump right into it. Firstly, what is the Super Earth Federation and what sets it apart from the Imperium of Man? Well, a few things. The managed democracy they protect means that each and every vote of the super citizens of Super Earth goes exactly where they would want it to go. Unlike the mindless servitors of the rotting Imperium, Super Earth citizens vote, and a machine designates the most useful candidate for their vote to go towards. Democracy in action. Secondly, they are led by the Helldivers. When SEAF, or Super Earth Armed Forces, can't get the job done, the Helldivers, especially trained soldiers of incredible talent and acclaim, stand behind and on top of enemy lines, supported by their super destroyers so that they can target specific objectives anywhere across the communist-ridden worlds of the unthinking automatons, the democracy-hating Illuminate, and the freedom-despising Terminids. Now, unlike Warhammer, which conveniently hides behind the excuse of we're so big we lost count to make room for people to headcanon their own endless armies of Astartes and guardsmen across the galaxy, Helldivers is canon to itself, meaning that the 7 billion Helldivers that have died since the game's launch in early 2024 are canon to the universe. Super Earth is able to throw around 7 billion soldiers at their problems without issue as they keep running, and have only grown in militaristic power since the Second Galactic War kicked off, at least within the bounds of a single calendar year. In terms of sheer attrition, yes, this can't compare to the guardsmen of the Astra Militarum, but the Helldivers are not guardsmen analogs and are more akin to the Adjudicators or Tempestus Scions at worst. Special ops soldiers of varying skill but incredible firepower, and in squads of no more than 30 at a time. Or units, I would say, followed by a super destroyer with enough ammunition to remove a small mountain range. On the scale of 40k, sure, the effects of Super Earth would be hard to dominate. The Imperium has bigger warships, they have bigger bombs, they have tougher super soldiers and a greater number of them, always pulling a bigger and bigger number of Astartes out of their ass when it's convenient for Redditors to argue back and forth over. But there's one thing that Super Earth has far up their sleeve: logistics, specifically speed. It's one thing to have numbers, it's another thing to have the advantage of surprise. One of the biggest detriments for most of the factions in 40k is their reliance on warp travel, which can make trips take weeks, months, or even centuries to complete. But Buster, sometimes they can arrive even before they left. Yes, that happens. Sometimes. Specifically, I can find examples of it happening exactly once, one cited example in a text from a Warhammer 40k story. Most of the time, if you're in the warp long enough to get spit out in a time that feels advantageous, you're getting turned into a demon along the way. This is a case of classic Warhammer memes turned embellishment, like people exaggerating the Orcish belief system, the power of the Celestial Array, or even the Ordo Chronos that we talked about back in my videos about Doctor Who. Go check that out if you want the details. For today, all that's important is while it's possible in 40k, it's not expected nor consistent in the way some fans will make it out to be. For Helldivers, however, their ability to cross the galaxy at a moment's notice is not only consistent, but gives them an incredible upper hand over most of Warhammer 40k's factions. Space Marines might be able to outclass them in a single battle, but when your fortress world gets swarmed by 1,000 destroyers that blot out the sun and drop several exterminatus' worth of ordnance on you before backup has a chance to arrive, let alone get a signal, there's little that even the forces of the Imperium can do to put up with that kind of pest. The biggest hiccup here is that Helldivers are reliant on the Terminids, Tyranid knockoffs, for fuel. Without fuel, or the ability to make new fuel, their logistical advantage instead becomes a nightmare. As crafty as they are, I'm sure the Super Earth fleets, if dropped into 40k, would have no issue finding an alternative, but on the flip side, there's a chance that they have to bring the Terminids with them, and that's not good for anybody, especially if they manage to be subsumed by the greater Tyranid fleets. Tyranids are bad on their own. They eat planets. More often than not, you're better off torching a planet they land on to slow them down, rather than fighting them. But Terminids, they produce clouds of gas so thick that it's nearly impossible to fly through the thickest regions of space under their control. Imagine a giant warp storm consuming the galaxy, but instead of demons, you just get assaulted by Tyranids in every direction, never to be seen again as you enter into the cloud. Now, separate from that is the Helldivers' propensity to experiment. No matter the lives sacrificed for the advancement of Super Earth, messing with black hole technology, using the weapons of their enemies to make their own forces stronger with each day, they'd take the arms of the Astartes and improve on it to make Ceramite work on a smaller scale. They'd take Necron weapons and Tau pulse rifles to turn them into the regular ordnance of Helldiver infantrymen. Warp shields and everything else, possibly even able to convert some hive worlds to their cause, as those who see their work as improvements and evolution for humanity would jump at the chance to work for them as some have done for Tau in the past. As for the Greater Imperium, it's touchy. Technology, especially the automatons, are tech heresy, powered by onboard AI systems, unless you're the Mechanicus. Taking the weapons of the Xenos as their own is another form of heresy, unless you're the Death Watch. Adopting the political systems of managed democracy is heresy. Well, no, they probably wouldn't mind that. The Administratum would probably love the Ministry of Truth. While different branches of the Imperium would want to adopt the Helldivers in different extremes like piecemeal, others may be quick to write them off altogether. As a secret anti-Xenos arm of the Ordo Xenos, they'd be hailed as heroes. Against the zealous lore keepers of the Soriatas, they'd be executed as outsiders, or at least attempted to be executed. It's hard to tell just how much they would be compatible with the Imperium of Man. Like a lot of these, they could, in some form, get adopted into it, but they would be changed so radically by the end of the transformation that Super Earth as we know it would not be recognizable afterwards. En masse, the divers would be accepted somewhat and rejected in other places. As far as them being adopted into the Imperium, I don't think there's any way for them to do so without being effectively conquered by mankind in 40k. Unless a figure like Gilliman or Big E himself built a treaty with them, trading their logistical powers of tech and travel for the remained autonomy of Super Earth, a la the Cult Mechanicum of Mars, and in some instances the Votan. The Helldivers would likely see their democracy torn to shreds in the grimdark future, too scattered to inherit these new stars. The more likely chance is that most of them fall the way of chaos. Helldivers may be logistically sound, but they're brainwashed thugs in bootstrapped armor. Super Earth lives and dies on its own endless propaganda. With this weakness of the mind not only present but encouraged, chaos will have plenty of holes to exploit. I mean that metaphorically, not literally, but also that could go the way of happening. Now, the Ministry of Truth will get mad at me if they ever hear me say this, but the managed democracy is all of the failures of the Emperor up to the 10th degree, all of the blind hegemon of the Imperium, at least as they're satirically joked about to be. Super Earth would be all too quick to lie to each and every one of their citizens about what chaos even is, and unwittingly open the door for a civil war, moving at light speed to topple their civilization. As much as it's strange to think about, the government of Super Earth is more free from the fundamental levels up than the Imperium of Man is, and Super Earth is fascist. Just food for thought. Super Earth and Helldivers in Warhammer 40k would be a footnote, too alien to comfortably combine with the Imperium among the legions of paranoid skeptics that guard the gates of authority, and too small to live on Elsewise. Best bet to retain their independence would to see the fleets of Super Earth shooting around the Milky Way like a gigantic pirate fleet akin to the Leagues of Votan, with a focus on developing greater technologies along the way. But in the scale of Warhammer, they would never be able to grow beyond the lights of chaos. And that'll be it today for Helldivers within 40k. If you want to see more along the lines of the Illuminate or the Automatons, let me know down below. freshly bred weapons of war, angels of the Emperor's grand design, the Astartes, and the storm host of Sigmar's divine will and eternal prejudice, the Stormcast. Two series of super soldiers who lead wars across realms, both mortal and immaterial. Welcome all you beautiful ladies and animals, as today we mix up the format. Normally, when it comes to these videos, I take a look at how a series like Warhammer 40k would handle some other sci-fi threats, from Helldivers to the Flood and Guardians of Destiny to Doomguy and Superman. But today is something a little different. Today we're comparing Warhammer to Warhammer. Specifically 40k to Age of Sigmar, the revitalized world of Warhammer fantasy, the universe that birthed Space Marines as we know it, as Games Workshop took the famed and popular Harry the Hammer, a Chaos champion, and used that silhouette to inspire their Space Marines way back in the 80s, or as the story goes. By the time of Age of Sigmar, the Stormcast are inspired by the Space Marines' ease of introduction to the hobby and have become the face of the new Warhammer Fantasy board game, meaning this matchup is literally the story of Harold Hammerstorm coming all the way back around to where it started. So join me as we compare and contrast Stormcast with their Astartes brethren, who may be chicken and egg all at once. We will look at their strengths, how they fluctuate throughout stories, and what they're generally capable of, and how they'd interact if they met one another. What it might look like if a battle host took on a chapter in full-out war. But real quick before we move on, I just want to give a massive thank you to all my beautiful members and patrons who you can join for just $1 a month. If you'd like to know more about the benefits, stick around to the end of the video. But with that, let's jump right into it. Now, based on my audience and videos I've done in the past, I'm sure you're very well aware of what a Space Marine is, but less known are the Stormcast Eternals. You may know of them as the Marines of Sigmar, but what are they actually? Just dudes in armor? Are they more superhuman? The answer is a lot more mystical and less direct in the same way that the Astartes are. Where Space Marines undergo a very rigorous process from puberty, where they have organs and other sci-fi crap shoved into them before being entombed in their armor, for a soldier to become a Stormcast, they are first chosen when mortal. Then, upon their death, their soul is taken from the realm of death and put upon the mighty anvil of creation, infused with a small glimmer of the God King Sigmar's own power, and remade as an eternal, no longer human, but something greater. Standing between 7 and 9 feet tall, roughly the same as your average Astartes, they can run faster and strike with greater force than most ordinary men, if not all of them. Add on top of that, they get special armor and weapons also infused with the magic of Sigmar's divine gifts. So while they seem very Space Marine-y on paper, the Stormcast are a lot closer to demons of Warhammer, specifically more like Chaos Marines, made greater by the gifts of their gods. It just so happens that Sigmar is a lot more of a chill dude when it comes to living creatures than Khorne or Nurgle, most of the time. Now, when comparing the weapons and armor of Ceramite in Astartes and Sigmarite of Stormcast, we're running a fool's errand where we need to compare two fictional metals from two fictional worlds where armor is just about as tough as Magnus is tall. It's not an answer that's going to be consistent between authors, characters, or the eras that these armies exist in. A lot of variables here are at play. We see Space Marines stabbed with trench shovels. We see Stormcast jabbed by cruel boys. We see other Space Marines shrug off plasma wounds, as well as seeing other Stormcasts tank artillery to the face. On top of all of that, there's a lot of different Space Marines and a lot of different Stormcast. Space Marines come in dozens of flavors. You can have a Black Templar who may be skilled but easily goaded into a bad fight. You can have a World Eater who hits hard but is a raging brute. You can have an Iron Hand that volunteers to let you chop off his hand because he needs some work done. Same goes for Stormcast. While the Astartes DNA is there in their creation and design, culturally, a lot of the Stormcast look closer to the Custodes. Most are diplomats, artisans, talented soldiers, and leaders, a lot more human-like. But at the same time, each visit upon the anvil removes an inch of that humanity little by little until you have a nearly feral, fervent soldier of Sigmar who swings on everything he sees. Next is how many units of these armies they will bring to the table. 2,000 points. No, not really. In the Astartes, they move in chapters of no more than 1,000 unless under special circumstances, and even of those 1,000, only 100 or so Marines exist in each company, which operate independently from one another unless, again, extenuating circumstances bring them together for an all-out war. Think crusades and the like. For the many storm hosts, the collections of Stormcast out there, the size is really non-restrictive. Some number in just a few dozen, others into the hundreds of thousands, so they can patrol the realms in force. Demons of the Warp, the Chaos Gods, cannot corrupt another god's demons. So the Stormcast, connected to a piece of Sigmar through their very soul, are not really going to worry for a Horus heresy breaking out. So, the level of how fair any battle between these two would be is entirely up to how you make it from the get-go. Are you forcing a measly 100 Marines of the Ultramarine Second to take on a force roughly equal in power and 1,000 times in size? Or pick out 100 Stormcast with their dragons, heroes, and magic into the fray against 100 Marines with a few dreadnoughts and aerial support? And when it comes to bringing down foes, we're looking at another equally mundane comparison. If a Stormcast lays a clean blow of their magical infused hammers upon an Astartes, the Space Marine is getting crushed. In the inverse, a well-placed bolter round will rip a Stormcast in half handedly. The biggest difference here is in the formation and tactics of each army. In an open field, Astartes will dominate with superior ranged weapons and, if prepared accordingly, can go toe-to-toe once things get close and personal. In a more claustrophobic battlefield, the Stormcast can better use terrain to their advantage in order to outplay the Marines. The second big difference is their order of squads. Stormcast fight in massive battles like the armies of old. While they can handle on their own, they are often seen in those massive fields flanked by archers, dragons, and artillery. Space Marines most often deploy in squads of 10 or less. Even across massive battlefields, it's rare to see more than 10, if not less, gathered around, unless the whole chapter is moving in on a divisive objective. We see a lot of this tactics in Space Marine 2, where Titus is only ever given 3 men to work with, including himself, up until the very final climactic battle of the ending, where you get the entire company working together to take out this objective.
For every one of them we kill, 2 more show up in their place. It's heavily guarded.
I'll need a combat squad, 5 men.
I can spare 3 men.
So the where, how, and why of the fighting will make a big difference. Space Marine and Stormcast going 1 for 1, the Stormcast can likely outplay the Marine with sheer skill. In a field and working as a full army, the Astartes Ordnance could just put down Stormcast. But they won't stay down. Stormcast are always reforged after their death. The only thing that stops them is after hundreds, if not thousands, of reclamations, is if their soul is not strong enough to be rebuilt, it just fizzles out. But the process of that can take eons. Even if you trapped a single Stormcast, you can't just spawn camp their corpse, as they can be restored practically anywhere, and can take between a few seconds to dozens of centuries to come back from the dead. In fact, the way that they're selected on the battlefield, and with the way both warrior cultures are formed, it's not an impossibility that mid-battle an Astartes can go down, then a few hours later be revived under Sigmar on the opposite team. And like we saw with Tenno and Guardians in the past, an enemy that comes back no matter what with no way to destroy them permanently means that no matter the size, you lose the battle of attrition. That's where the modern Imperium is with Chaos Marines. The Stormcast only have ground to gain, and the Astartes can only lose, as it can take decades before Marine Scouts are up and ready to be fighting, even in the rare instance of something like a Psyker being able to delete Stormcast. All of the Stormcast are Psykers to some extent, even if it's very little, while Astartes librarians are very, very rare, a handful across entire chapters, let alone companies. Stormcast simply outnumber Astartes in the mystical arts, with the exception of the Grey Knights, but we're mainly focusing on the traditional Astartes here. But even in that exception, Grey Knights don't come back from the dead, and there's at least a paltry 1,000 of them. They are again outnumbered by Stormcast Eternals with a tremendous disadvantage. In battles of pure attrition, even if they have the numerical or tactile disadvantage, the mystical element of the Stormcast means they can effectively outlast a force of Astartes ad infinitum, only ever growing in strength. Space Marines can win the battles, the Stormcast will win the war, echoing the same depressing gap between the dying Imperium in 40k, kept alive by sheer spite against the forces of chaos which always find a way to return. Now, if they weren't going into a straight battle, could they work together? If the Imperium discovered a storm host of Eternals on some backwater planet, protecting a long-forgotten city in some corner of the galaxy, how would they react? Well, it depends on who finds them. On one hand, their powers and unique tie to the Mystic make them a very valuable ally, especially when fighting chaos. A Stormcast with the blessed armor they normally have, encouraged by the even greater ability of bolters and high-tech weapons, would be like bringing micro-custodes who can't be corrupted into the fray. On the other hand, they are essentially a party made entirely of mystical psykers. While some chapters wouldn't mind, and especially distrusting Inquisitor or some chapter that despises this, like Space Wolves or the Templars, might move and try to eliminate them for that alone. Now, the biggest question you might have is, Buster, the Stormcast pray to and even in some ways interact directly with Sigmar. Doesn't this go entirely against the imperial truth of seeing the God Emperor as, well, God? Kind of. See, when we talk about systems of belief in 40k, we often see it as cults pray to chaos, orcs pray to Gork and Mork, and the Imperium prays to the Emperor. This is true in a broad stroke sense, but not the full truth. Like the Crusaders and dogmatic theists they're inspired by, the Crusades and colonial Christian religions that sailed around the globe and adopted pagan beliefs in order to better bring people to their side, how they adopted the spring equinoxes, Easter, or the traditions of Christmas into their own mythos, the Imperium will use many of these same devices. It's really hard to get a million different planets to ignore their god and give up on it, and instead believe in some random dude on a chair on Earth. But it's a lot easier to see the idea that their god is just the Emperor in disguise, taken from an Astartes index.
To the Apocalypse of the worlds bordering the Hell Stars of the Garrod Nebula, he is the bringer of merciful death, deliverance from the evil that stalks their worlds by night. To the feral natives of Miral, the Emperor was the great beast that stalked the dark places of their forests, and to the acid miners of Mordant, he is the guiding spirit light that keeps the all-encompassing darkness at bay. The Forge World, Telemachus, revered him as the great blacksmith, the molder of all things, and the people of Limnus Epsilon believed he lived in their sun, breathing radiance down upon them, his warriors coming every century to claim the best of the world's youth, to fight at his side within the fiery heart of their star.
The Imperium merely suggests that whatever local gods exist are also just the God Emperor. Aside from those stated, the most famous example of these is the cult Mechanicum of Mars, who devote their lives to the motive force, the machine god, and the Omnissiah. There is nothing that says the Emperor is the Omnissiah, he just happened to check enough boxes, so they attribute his existence to that title. In much the same way, if the Imperium could get over the general mysticism of the Stormcast and the Eternals actually wanted to be a part of the Imperium in return, it would be very easy to see the godly warrior who once fought among men but ascended to godhood in order to lead mortals into a great age of war against the forces of chaos as nothing more than a conjoined faith in both Sigmar and the God Emperor of mankind at the same time, the line between which would become incredibly blurred. As far as the Administratum or Ecclesiarchy is concerned, Sigmar is not another deity, but rather the Emperor by another name. Unless he manages to reveal himself, or get into a spectral tussle with Big E, in which case all hell might just break loose. Introducing Sigmar himself to 40k is a completely different thing. I'm not touching that today. And for today, that'll be it, dear viewer. Let me know what you thought down below, how you think Eternals and Astartes may interact in different ways, and if you'd like to see any other 40k and Sigmar comparisons, if not comparisons of Sigmar into other fantasy and sci-fi universes.
The most dominant lizards on the planet from the Triassic, Jurassic, and Cretaceous periods were incredible species of life, from the mighty Triceratops to the fierce raptors and the staggering giant that was the Patagotitan. Dinosaurs are cool, but you know what else is cool? Space Marines, the fictional super soldiers of Warhammer 40k. Welcome all you beautiful ladies and animals. No, ladies and dinos, as today we delve into the question that nobody asked, but everybody wants an answer to. If you plopped a space marine next to any number of dinosaurs, who comes out of that battle on top? Like always, if you like this video and want even more like it, leave a comment, a like, or subscribe to the channel so you're up to date with all the new videos I make coming every week. Also, for those who love our prehistoric planet, I know not all of the animals I'm speaking about are technically dinosaurs, but we're going somewhere between the heightened realism of Warhammer 40k and the actual science of these majestic animals. So for the sake of brevity, I will be referring to all of these, including the pterosaur, as dinosaurs. Hello, boo, it's me. I just wanted to take a second here as well at the beginning, because I really like this stuff. The scientific discoveries, paleontology, all that kind of goes into how we know about and how we understand dinosaurs or ancient creatures in general. And while yes, I will talk about it a few times throughout the video, a lot of the science in this video that I'm presenting is fluffed up for entertainment purposes. It's like mostly true, but like the application of said science is kind of glazed over for the sake of making it more enjoyable to watch. And I just wanted to reinforce that these creatures and these things from our past in Earth's history aren't just animals, you know, as much as I posture them as monsters or beasts in this very video, and that's kind of how they're treated in a lot of things like Jurassic Park and other types of media. At the end of the day, they're just animals. You know, they're big animals. They're very, very maybe scary or threatening if you were to see one in real life, but they're not monsters. You know, they're not creatures of the night looking to like steal you from your bed or anything. In the same way dinosaurs in the Jurassic Park movies, or even like alien creatures that are based on dinosaurs in series like Warhammer, tend to be. But I just wanted to leave this here because it's kind of a myth thing, and I know I play into it by the very nature of this video, but it's an important distinction to keep in mind that like the entertainment and the framing of dinosaurs and ancient creatures in this video is separate from how they would actually be. This is not if real-life dinosaurs fought a space marine. This is if Jurassic Park dinosaurs fought a space marine, which is a very, very important difference, and that's just kind of how it goes. But anyways, that's it. Thank you very much for watching. Now, let's choose a space marine to fight our dinos. Now, really quickly, if you're unfamiliar, Space Marines are not humans in power armor. They're heavily modified humans in power armor and come in all shapes and sizes. The greatest difference between them is their gene seed, essentially an extra organ that allows them to inherit traits from their Primarchs, the sons of the Emperor and the fathers of the Marines. These range from making the Marines into furries, really stubborn and racist, or just making them really good at using Excel. Now, for today, I'm going to be using one strain of Marines who literally hunt dragons to prove themselves to the rest of their chapter. The Salamanders, space marines hailing mostly from the world Nocturne. Now, the benefits of their gene seed is that they are the broadest, thickest marines, as their father Vulcan is literally the largest Primarch. They exist in a culture of artisans and smiths that constantly work on their own gear and forge their armor using the many volcanoes of Nocturne. Hephaestus would be proud. But coming from a land of volcanoes, of course the Salamanders hunt dragons, or more specifically, fire drakes, also known as salamanders, but salamander is both the name of the legion, the dragons, and the fire drake is the name of some units, and also the dragon. But nobody ever accused GW of being smart with their naming conventions. But seeing as they hunt dragons in-universe, it feels fitting to put a champion of Nocturne up against our big lizards for this challenge. Now for the Marines of the most swole chapter, we need to figure out just what they're capable of, because I'm going to be putting them against the Dinosaurs in their power armor, but unarmed. See, guns are basically just cheating, and no matter what video games or movies will try to tell you, dinosaurs would not have some innate ability to resist firearms more than anything else on the planet. There are cases of large animals like elephants shrugging off 90-some shots of 9mm while being enraged, but some virgin poachers and a few AK-47s is all it normally takes to get the job done. And a Marine firing an explosive Red Bull can from their sidearm is going to be a little bit overkill. So to keep things interesting, our Marine is going to be a pugilist. This creature doesn't seem like it was born with steel-plated skin. Strange. Now, to get down the specific strength of a Marine is, well, it's a challenge to say the least. In some sources, they buckle under the weight of lifting a tank, somewhere in the 60-ton range, as the Marine servos in their armor begin to give out. In others, it's said the Space Wolves can uproot trees with their bare hands, and if you've ever pulled a stump before, you know just how insane that would be. Especially for the northwestern sequoia-esque evergreens of Fenris where the wolves come from. While sources like the Deathwatch RPG puts the average liftability of a Marine around 6,000 pounds or about 3 tons, barely half the weight of an elephant and nowhere near any tank, even if you double it for the Primaris Marines. But we're talking about the largest of the Marines, Salamanders, and we're going to make him a hero. In the nature of Warhammer 40k, our Marine shall be called Assidio Draconis. Points to anyone who can translate that in the comments. Now, with the intense power buff that being a named Primaris Space Marine is, we're going to call the totally scientific and definitely not arbitrary lift strength of Assidio at 20,000 pounds of force, or about 10 tons. This would make him capable of tipping African elephants like cows, but not so strong that he would be flipping tanks onto their backs. We're pitting made-up super soldiers against dinosaurs anyways, so I'm not super concerned by the hard science here. And on top of that, they're fast, with Primaris Marines running roughly 50 miles an hour. Enough to keep up with semis on the freeway, but getting outrun enough to warrant the use of vehicles on the ground. Otherwise, there'd be no point in taking a bulky Space Marine warbike. But with that strength and speed established, let's see what Draconis is going up against. Let's see the stage of rulers of the earth for millions of years before Homo sapiens were even on 2 legs. The dinosaurs of our past are immense creatures of varying size, ability, and strength. For today, we're picking a few from all different time periods to pit against our Dracones, from raptors to Titanosaur to the armored carapace of the Ankylosaurus, and of course, the great Tyrannosaur. Each and every one of these will be framed as a battle in an open ring in a wide, grassy field. So without further ado, let's get into it. Now, if the name isn't giving it away, the Utah raptor is a species of carnivorous raptor from what is now known as Utah, land of the Super Soakers. While the raptors weren't awkwardly laying in beds with their friends, they were just slightly less aggressive than your typical Mormon. More seriously, now unlike other raptor species, and in comparison to humans, the Utah raptor was a beast of a dinosaur, standing at roughly 5 feet tall at the hips, and stretching out from snout to tail at 20 feet in length on average. These massive feathered hunters could weigh up to 1,100 pounds, or about half a ton. Now, while they sport an impressive maw of 27 to 30 serrated blade-like teeth, according to paleontologists, that would just be the backup plan, as their legs would be the main drive behind the raptor's kill strategy. Get up close, kick and scratch with sharp claws on their toes, and use the serrated teeth to finish off their kill. Using ambush tactics like a tiger, their immense size and weight doing most of the heavy lifting once they struck, rather than being fast and precise like they're portrayed in the movies. But for Earth, they'd still be decently fast, probably somewhere in the 15 to 20 mile per hour zone, which is much faster than most creatures, and even the fastest humans alive would struggle to outrun them. But here's where we start seeing the downsides. The Utah raptor is running half the speed of our Space Marine with just about the same weight behind them, so it's going to look not too dissimilar from a Marine fighting a Tyranid warrior hand to hand. Honestly, as a first intro of Dinosaur vs. our Astartes Assidio, all he'd need to do is to get the dino into a headlock and try to break its neck. While they're similar in size and weight, Draconis is capable of lifting 20 times the Utah's weight at his maximum. But their legs would be immensely strong. Obviously, we can't test the Utah raptor today, but by taking one of their surviving cousins, the African ostrich, who kicks with nearly 2,000 pounds of force at a third of the weight, to put into perspective, and by fluffing some easy numbers, again, dinosaurs versus fictional marines, you could roughly call the kick from a Utah raptor to be around 6,000 pounds of force on the best of days, or about 26,000 joules. About 8,000 more joules than a 50 cal anti-material round. Something that Marines die to all the time, not taking into account the ballistic mechanics that go into a bullet versus the kick from an ostrich or raptor. But right away, with my bad chicken scratch math and a little bit of scientific posturing, this seems like a fairly even matchup, which again reinforces why guns are just overkill. Not only would it make our Marine faster and just about equal in terms of physical strength, it means he'd be able to fire bullets just as powerful as the Utah's kick from hundreds of feet away, and that's before you factor in the explosive payload of bolter rounds. Unfortunately though, for the Utah raptor, this first test of strength goes to the Marine. Draconis claims his first kill, but this was just the runt of the litter. From here on out, the dinos only get bigger, nastier, and meaner. The armored tanks that hail from the western half of North America, the Ankylosaurus is like an armadillo's final Pokemon evolution. Armored, hefty, clunky, standing around 7 foot tall at the crest of their spike-laden backs and stretching about 20 to 26 feet long, the Anky fits about the same rough dimensions as the Utah raptor, but it's just a lot bigger, wider. Standing proud on 4 trunk-like legs, the Anky weighed anywhere from 5 to 8 tons, pushing the upper limit of a Marine's strength. Obviously, this dino isn't going to be as fast or as sharp, for the lack of a better word, compared to the raptor. His best chance against the Drake Hunter is going to be trampling or smashing upon the Astartes with the mighty clubbed tail of the famous Ankylosaurus. In the inverse, the Anky is a lot harsher to damage from the Marine side. Draconis can't as easily wrap his arms around its neck to choke it out or break its spine, but he can flip it over and maybe even attempt to use Anky's own weapons against itself, as we see them do with Tyranids all the time. Based on this research paper I found trying to estimate the strength of an Anky's tail, that will be linked below, they put the impact at around 1,100 newtons of force on the upper end, or about 2,250 pounds of force, just above the ostrich kick from earlier, instead just coming from a small, hard-to-aim tail rather than a more precise kick to the chest. Unfortunately for Ankylosaurus, it's a herbivore, which means all of its tools and natural defenses would be built for keeping other animals away, not trying to take them on itself. If catching just right, yeah, it could bash away a space marine or even cave their skull in if they were lucky enough to hit just right on the side of the head. But that's likely not going to happen. Instead, Ocidio can just walk right up, use his immense speed and strength to lift the dino onto its back and immobilize it before claiming the second kill for himself. Arguably maybe even easier than the raptor. A rhino on steroids, taking on any Triceratops head-on is going to be a massive struggle for the Marine. Our largest dino yet, standing roughly 12 feet tall at the top of its crest, and weighing between 9 to 11 tons. This is our first dinosaur that pushes the limits of Draconis' strength, and any lesser Marine would break the servos in their armor before even coming close to lifting a single of the beast's legs off of the ground. It features the famous horns reaching about a meter in length, protruding from the armored frill and matched with a dangerous sharp beak. We don't have an exact bite force data on the Triceratops since researchers focus more on predators like T-Rex, but we can estimate using modern animals. A hippo, which is half the size, bites with about 1800 psi. Scaling that up, a trike's bite could be just as devastating as the Utah Raptor's kick, and that's not even taking into account the differences from a large beak of a Triceratops versus the open maw of a hippo. Again, playing with really lazy and loose math gives us a trike bite about as strong as the Raptor's kick from earlier, or about as strong as getting hit by a bolter round without the explosive aspect making it even worse. If the trike gets a hold of Draconis' arm, it's coming off. If it pierces any part of his armor, the horns are burying right through his flesh. But again, like many herbivorous dinos, the trike was slow and heavy, likely half as fast as the Marine, but its defensive front end is a challenge even for the Astartes. He can't flip the monstrous beast. He can't grab hold of the neck in any capacity that would give him an upper hand. Any strike from the frill, bite from the beak, or skewer from the horns would spell his doom. The best hope for Draconis is to try and batter the face of Triceratops and manually crack its skull, beating away with his gloved hands, while hoping it doesn't catch him off guard and trample him before taking a chunk out of his power armor with the immense strength of its beak. And while a Marine may be able to crush a human skull in their hands, the skull of a Triceratops was built to clash with other skulls and horns of equally massive 10-ton beasts. If he's able to do it, it's going to take a lot of effort and force, nearly draining the Marine to his limit. Unlike the last two fights, brute strength won't guarantee victory here. The trike's defenses are near impenetrable for the Marine, and a single mistake could be fatal. It's a true battle of endurance, power, and luck. So who do you think takes it? Let me know down below. Flight really was a broken ability in all of Earth's history. It still continues to be overpowered in modern warfare today. But does this mean that any pterosaur, or specifically for today, the largest that we know of, in the form of Quetzalcoatlus northuropi, that's a name I'm going to butcher, I'm going to call him Quet instead, would Quet be able to overpower or undermine a Marine who's disarmed? Standing nearly 15 feet tall, this flying nightmare fuel is the largest pterosaur that we know of. Not going to lie, looking at reconstructions of this thing makes me wish we had dragons instead. That would be a lot more comforting. While we don't know much about this specific genus of pterosaur, with only 2 examples of the species being found in modern-day Texas, estimates of its gross wingspan number up to 75 feet wide, and that's almost as wide as a single wing of a 747 Boeing aircraft. And more modern estimates put it closer to a 30-foot wingspan, but that's much more boring for our purpose today. Now, while it's absolutely disgustingly massive and even compared to our salamander is nearly twice as tall, the Quet doesn't hunt like most predators. If you couldn't tell by its avian appearance, it, like many pterosaurs, would have preyed more so on fish and smaller animals, using its aggressive size and beak to swallow smaller animals whole or peck them to death if need be. Against smaller prey, Quet was death from above. But against a space marine, a living tank built to endure the worst the galaxy has to offer, that's another story. Does speed and flight give Quet the edge, or is he just a bigger target waiting to be grounded? Well, here's where you get to learn something new. See, the quote, hollow bones of flying animals like birds and pterosaurs were not only used by other sauropods such as the titanosaurs, but these bones are also a lot more durable than you may have inferred when learning about birds in your 5th grade science class. The specifically pneumatic bones of pterosaurs and birds don't make them lighter, instead just allow these animals to fill their bones with oxygen. So yes, less dense, but not any less sturdy. This excess in oxygen for flying animals lets them, well, fly. And for massive beasts like sauropods, the extra oxygen keeps them from dying of heat stroke. So right away, don't assume that if Draconis gets a good strike against the Quet's leg, that it'll just snap like a board of pine wood. It's going to make sweeping airstrikes, pecking at our marine from the sky, stabbing at him with a 2.5 meter long beak, close to 8 feet long. A beak so long that it's nearly as tall as Osidio himself. Can the marine wrestle this gigantic beast to the ground? Well, as even our largest beast so far, the Quet only would have weighed around 500 to 600 pounds at the maximum, close to a quarter ton, thanks to those pneumatic bones. So unlike Triceratops, who could wrestle Draconis like a raging crocodile, the Quet is much less of a heavyweight. Getting a good handle on the Quet, forcing its head into the sand, unfortunately, or I guess fortunately, I could see Draconis easily overpowering the world's largest flyer if he was able to get his hands on it. Hopefully, this nightmare of the sky just flies off instead. This pterosaur will be claimed by the hunt. The absolute largest animal to walk the soil of the earth that we know of, an apex herbivore in its own right, and something that would have fended off against the largest and scariest monsters in what is now Argentina during the early Cretaceous period. And when I mean largest, I mean largest. Of course, things in our oceans have gotten bigger, but they are too big to step out of the water and contend with everything on land. This titanosaur, it stood up to 24 feet tall at the shoulder, stretching 120 feet from tip to tail, weighing in from anywhere around 60 tons up to 76 tons. Nearly triple, if not quadruple, the upper maximum strength for our space marine. This is an animal that stands and weighs in at roughly 2/3 the size of an Imperial Knight from 40k. Now, that's an issue, because if you're unfamiliar with the description apex herbivore, let me tell you something new. An apex herbivore is an animal so large that it effectively removes itself from the cycle of predator and prey. Think of modern-day African elephants. Even as dangerous as the animals of Africa can be, nothing wants to fuck with the elephants. Now, that's not saying a pride of lions or an especially large tiger can't kill an elephant, but they always aim for the smaller, weaker, isolated elephants where they can. Because if an elephant catches you with their tusk, you're getting ripped open and left in a field for the vultures to pick at. Patagotitan was much the same. Even massive predators like Allosaurus wouldn't be able to take on these titans once they were fully grown. Now, they could follow behind a herd, nibble at the weakest one and use their serrated teeth to slowly bleed it to death, but they're not going to take on one in a fair, even fight. For Draconis, it's exactly the same. Draconis is tough. He's fought monsters, survived gunfire, and even crushed skulls with his bare hands. But this is a walking mountain. He can't wrestle it, can't knock it down, can't find a weak spot. He's fighting a living titan. Getting stepped on by its massive feet would simply crush his organs within his suit of power armor. Without any weapons or blades to break it down slowly, bleeding the Colossus to death, there's not much Draconis can do facing it one-on-one. In an open field, unarmed, it's just too much for even a giant space marine to be taking on alone. In this instance, the Earth's largest walker takes the win. the king of the Cretaceous period, one of the largest, most domineering animals to ever exist in the history of Earth that we know of. The strongest bite and the biggest teeth. Today, we end our hunts with the king of the dinosaurs, Tyrannosaurus, the T-Rex. Standing 13 feet tall at the hip, stretching out up to 42 feet by the end of his tail, a staggering 8 to 9 tons in size, the T-Rex is a beast of an animal with a bite force of 12,800 pounds per square inch. Now yes, if trying to bite down on the marine ceramite armor, supposedly stronger than steel, the tyrant is getting set up for a one-way trip to the dentist. There's more to a bite than strength. Depending on where it bites makes a big difference. If trying to bite Acidio right along the chest plate, it won't work well. But if it gets around any of his major joints, the nature of a T-Rex bite is essentially what does the damage. When you look at other animals bite with their teeth, it's not the bite that kills you. With dogs, it's the violent jerking motion in the focus on their prey's neck. With alligators, it's the violent spin after they latch on. With Tyrannosaur, it's more of the same. It's not just going to bite down, it's going to bite, swing, and throw Acidio through the air, using its massive legs and tail to swat him away all the same. While the weight of a T-Rex puts the tyrant around the same class as the Triceratops, the battle is going to fall right into the same category as the Trike. Could Draconis take it down without weapons? Maybe. Possibly. But the chances are not on his side. If T-Rex gets a hold of him, that's damn near game over. One thing that applies to all of these fights against the toughest of prehistoric lizards against space marines that I haven't mentioned until right now is sweat. See, if you're unaware, one of humanity's greatest tools is sweat. We sweat a lot. Now yes, other animals sweat, but they don't sweat from every single pore on their body. Now, why is that important? Well, it's humanity's key to killing animals hundreds of times larger than them. No single man can kill a mammoth. But a single man with a spear and the endurance to chase a mammoth cross-country for days on end, slowly watching it bleed out as they keep up effortlessly, that's our real superpower. Animals like cheetahs can run triple the max speed of mankind, but they can only do so for less than a second. It burns a lot of energy. For us, sweating so profusely allows us to cool down and effectively run forever, at least until we die of literal exhaustion, which goes doubly so for a space marine. Other animals, including the T-Rex, can't run for an entire day before being winded, let alone weeks on end like the Astartes. So basically, the only way Acidio is truly going to ensure his victory over these beasts of ancient Terra is if he returns to the oldest style of hunting in the human playbook and simply runs them into exhaustion. In that way, and that way alone, Draconis can defeat each and every one of these titans of lizard kind and prove himself the superior species made in the Emperor's vision, at least the most effective way of doing so. At the end of the day, before we even stepped into the stars, before the fantastical future of Warhammer even began, humanity had dominated the apex of animals on Earth by the strength of our endurance alone. And there we have it. Astartes versus some of my favorite prehistoric animals. If you'd like to see more of this, or more videos like this, let me know down below. There's a lot of really cool and fascinating animals all throughout Earth's history, and from other series to get into, so when a tank just isn't efficient enough, for when infantry doesn't bring enough firepower, and when you need to aura farm, mech suits are a fantastic alternative in a sci-fi war. They're distinct, they're cool, and they stand out, quite literally, on the battlefield. So today, welcome all you beautiful ladies and animals. Instead of going into the more general analysis I often do of comparing 40k to other armies or settings, we're going to delve into and take a gander at mech suits. Specifically, a handful of mechs from Warhammer's various factions compared to a handful of other sci-fi greats. Now,
First off the bat, we need a baseline of what a mech suit even is, because a walking tank can vary incredibly in size, from the silverbacks in Gears of War to the massive modular parts of Voltron. For me, a mech suit in the Dreadnought category, which is going to be our main point of comparison for today, is any suit that's roughly the size of a tank, but has some form of legs or limbs to reflect the pilot within it. And the second big requirement is that it needs an actual pilot. The next point I want to bring up is our 40k benchmarks. For today, I'm bringing only 4 specific units from Warhammer's many armies. A penchant engine from the Cerritos, a Death Dread from the Orcs, a Crisis suit of the Tau, and the now standard Redemptor Dread of the Astartes. I point these 4 out explicitly as a filter system for us to compare the rest to. Warhammer has so many different mechs, from Dread Knights to Warsuits to Custodes Contemptors, and even the larger stuff like Knights and Titans. So taking these 4 from across 4 different factions will give us a decent idea of how the non-Warhammer stuff might hold up against 40k more generally. If you'd like to see an episode of us taking a look at Jaegers and Titans and Knights and whatever else, the more bigger stuff, let me know down below. And as always, a big beautiful thank you to all my gorgeous members and patrons, but with that, let's get right into our benchmarks. Warhammer has a lot of different unique mechanical vehicles that range from a knockoff ATST to baby carriers. But today, to kind of build a sort of tier list in comparing other franchises to Warhammer, we're going with only 4, ranging from barely an exosuit in the Penchant engine to the dominant machines of war in the Astartes Dreadnoughts. So let's talk about these 4 benchmarks first, before we start bringing in Titans and Armored Cores. The Penchant engines are foremost tools of subservience. They are reserved for criminals that the church has decided for whom death would be too merciful, which by imperial standards probably means they were organizing a labor union. They are tools of the church of torture and penance, where the convicted tree hugger is strapped to the front of a death machine and sent off to fight on the front lines of their holy wars. Now, while the engines are indeed scary and powerful, they also sit at the bottom because they're kind of intended to die. After the pilot is hooked up, their brain hardwired to the machine, they are pumped full of enough drugs to maybe even give Charlie Sheen a buzz.
If there are, you better find them and give them to me immediately.
Just so they can stay awake and fight through the pain. The machine itself is driven by their own dependence on forgiveness, meaning that if the spirit breaks, the rest of the suit goes with them. And of course, there's a lack of armor, being that all the pain being inflicted on them, exposed across the hood, is a part of the whole repentance idea. Now, the downside of throwing a cyber psycho into a mini dreadnought is that they don't have the mental clarity for finesse nor aim, so you're not getting much range out of a user. They're going to be reliant on close-up weaponry like power claws and saw bits, or short-range weapons like flamethrowers, really lowering their range and ability to outsmart or outskill their opponent. While the engines are armed to the teeth, they're more so used to be thrown at a line of infantry and go careening through, opening the way for the more skillful Sisters of Battle to clean up behind, until they inevitably die with all their organs exposed to the wind. Now, the next entry of ours is equally as brutal and devastating, but run by somebody who's in it for the love of the game rather than being hate-crimed over a thought crime. The Orcish Death Dreads. A 4-armed death machine loaded up with guns, with an excited but later depressed orc boy at the helm, wired in and driven mad by his lack of crumpin' from behind the wheel of one of Sid's toys. Now this is what I was talking about. Now, they are powerful and tougher than the Penchant engines from before, but still made of orcish machinery and more here for the sake of dealing damage than anything else. A wrecking ball with arms and legs rather than an instrument of war. Against something like a powerful Astartes Dread, the Def comes on top maybe 2 out of 10 times. Like the engine before it, the orcs are mainly bringing them along to cause mayhem and suppress infantry units, rather than using them as bunker busters or crushing other tanks with it. That being said, with rocket launchers and extra arms, you'd have a hard time trying to get away from this thing up close, even in another mech suit. You know that move your younger cousins or siblings pull where they lay down and just start kicking around wildly? That's the Death Dread in mechanical form. Wild, uncontrollable, but you aren't getting close to them without picking up a few bruises of your own. But in a battle of range, speed, or skill, they will be outdone almost every time, which brings us to the Tau. The XV-8 Crisis Battlesuit is a mainstay of the Tau army, a suit of armor as durable as the Astartes Ceramite at half the weight. A modular system that can be equipped with a tool for every job, condensing the firepower of an entire Space Marine squad into a single suit that sits somewhere between a tactical dreadnought and a dreadnought. Now, while the XV-8s are not going to be one-suit killing machines against entire armies, they are surprisingly powerful in a way that outdoes the mechs before them, where the orcs and criminals were mostly constrained to lumbering in close quarters. The Tau excel in speed and accuracy, able to glide if not fly over the battlefield, dropping railgun shots from 7 miles out and cleaning any unarmored engine before they're even able to comprehend what hit them, running circles around a Death Dread, and all in all, simply being better in nearly every way. And while not common, Farsight, a Tau exile who became very unorthodox in his fighting style, has shown us just what's possible when the crisis suits are pushed to the extreme, even able to dominate in close quarters if trained for that purpose. And he uses a heavier version of the crisis suit. And in any battle, if they're prepared ahead of time, they can be outfitted to counter you almost perfectly. Big and slow, they're going to put on some extra boosters and take pot shots from a few miles out. Soft and squishy, they're charging headfirst to skewer your heart on a pike. Hiding in a cave, they're going in like Captain Price and flashbanging the crib in pitch darkness. The biggest downside for the XV-8 is anything that can keep up with them or withstand their attacks for long enough to wear them down and gain the upper hand, or any instance where they are simply outnumbered and cornered with nowhere to run. While their ability may be incredible, there's no doubt that any Death Dread able to grab a hold of a crisis suit might just rip them in half. But where muscles, armor, and firepower need to be the best of the best across the board, the Redemptor Dreadnought comes out to play. Now, you might be wondering why I chose this variant specifically. Well, it's a good mixture of assets. Brutalis Dreads are more melee focused, while the Ballistus Dreads are entirely focused on range. I only bring it up to mention that, like the XV-8 warsuits, Space Marine Dreadnoughts can often be fitted with various weapons and kits to take on a variety of enemies. If the Ballistus can't snipe a Death Dread from a mile away, the Brutalis would rip the arms off one by one. But I'm focusing on the Redemptor as it's a nice little Goldilocks zone. Carrying an A-10 Warthog cannon on one arm, rocket pods, a heavy piston-driven power fist, grenade launchers, heavy bolters, and even a secondary flamer gives a Redemptor, the largest dread ever employed by the Astartes, all the firepower they need to outdo Israel in a contest of committing the most damage to residential areas in a 10-minute killing spree. And that's before going into the raw strength of a Dread, which can rip chaotic Hellbrutes in half or throw giant stones into their enemies. Roll the clip. If you get too close to a Dread, even in another suit of armor, you're getting crushed. And at range, you're getting filled with enough lead to fossilize you in place as the sheer number of bullets and rockets flying your way replace each and every atom of your body with the destructive force of the Emperor's wrath. While the Marine inside suffers for their increased power, being mentally and physically drained by the more advanced systems of the Redemptor, like a human battery until they die and are replaced by another, the time they spend entombed in these walking war crimes gives them enough opportunity to crush a near unlimited number of squishy targets, as we're getting to a point where you need an equal or greater force to slow them down, let alone take them down for good. The Redemptor Dread is not the most dangerous mech in all of 40k, but it is certainly up there, as even the Brutalis pattern can threaten the dominant knights if given a chance to tear apart their legs. If you're on the ground, you don't want to see this guy coming for you. And if you're in another mech, you better pray that your onboard weapons are at least as powerful as theirs. It's a great unification of the previous mechs we've discussed. It's powerful but horrifying. It's brutal yet sincere, and it remains accurate while fervent. A beautiful tool of war that would make the military-industrial complex shed a white tear down the leg, while also representing the unadulterated pain and suffering of Warhammer 40k. But with those benchmarks laid out, what else is out there? There's a lot of different mech suits across fiction to choose from. Some have come up in videos before, like the Titanfall Titans, Fallout Power Armor, and more. And some are constantly requested in all of my comments. Armored Core. So today I'll be pulling a few out of a hat and be applying them to this tier list. So just know these are not representative of an entire franchise or universe, but just where these sci-fi made-up suits of armor compare to the Warhammer suits we've talked about so far. Now, our two requirements for a mech suit was that A, it has to be about the size of a tank, and B, it needs to be operated by a living pilot, not an automaton. So with that in mind, let's just get into it. First on our list is the Patriot Exosuit from Helldivers 2, a light weapons platform that serves as supplementary support and helps apply surgical amounts of damage against specific enemies on the field, when it doesn't decide to be made out of wet cardboard, that is. Wielding a minigun and rocket pods capable of dealing moderate damage to semi-armored enemies, the Patriot is built best for taking on leagues of undemocratic stragglers, rather than focusing fire on the most extreme well-armored targets. Against infantry? Great! Against anything else? You'd be better off calling it an expendable anti-tank. As a ranged platform with limited ammo and low mobility, it serves as a great mobile turret, but anything fighting it up close or that has higher accuracy is putting it down. For our list today, it's going right on the same level as the penchant engines, as whoever wins that fight is going to come down to whoever gets the first few licks in. In Gears of War, everything from the soldiers to the animals are beefy, so it's no surprise that the Silverback Exosuit is a big, chunky toddler equipped with rockets and a minigun. But unlike everyone else who likes to leave the front exposed, the Silverback only leaves the pilot's back exposed to enemy fire. In the smallest point of logic that I can kind of give, at least this comes from the fact that the Silverback began as a commercial forklift-style mech suit before being militarized for the Locust War. When in operation with a team, the Silverback's whole purpose is to get up front, soak up small arms fire, and deploy small shields off of its legs, which can be used by other gears to take cover. And in the world of Gears, where general purpose rifles fire long arm ammo, and the weakest pistol is using something close to 50 AE, the Mulcher minigun and rockets on the Silverback tear apart nearly anything they come across. Whether an armored Cantus or a massive Brumach, the Silverback is an actually powerful suit of armor held back by a dependency on teammates, painfully slow movement, and an exposed backside. And like the Patriot, doesn't offer that much in the way of melee options. For this one, I'm putting it just above the engine, as the immense firepower and the fact that they managed to protect the front of the armor means that the Silverback will be able to get a few more shots out than they're taking in. But if anything bigger gets close, the gear inside is getting ripped right out of the controls. Come on guys, I just gave Gears credit for putting armor on the front and now we're doing away with it again? Who did this? Why? Okay, whatever, I'll live with it. Arasaka's prototype cyberskeleton from Edgerunners is honestly a little fucking insane. It basically turns you into a mechanized Magneto, only able to operate with gravitational generators, which is fancy sci-fi talk for magic that turns gravity on and off to both offset the weight of the suit itself and crush anyone unfortunate enough to get close. Add on to that, 2 arms with 3 hands each and the ability to activate powerful as shit magnets, and you've got a very dangerous warsuit which is only really being dragged down by the lack of forward-facing armor. That's not true. The bigger downside than the lack of armor is that it also just drives you insane. See, in Cyberpunk, there's this idea of cyberpsychosis, where having so much cyberware plugged into your brain makes you go batshit. The same idea as the penchant engines in Astartes Dreads, where it normally builds gradually until you snap, and different people have different levels of tolerance. You kinda get the idea. If being in a dreadnought is like taking a bump of coke every day for the rest of your life until you go crazy, getting into the Arasaka suit is like eating a literal brick of Johnny Depp's best cocaine in a single sitting, and then trying to fight God right after.
Yeah, we just didn't want to interrupt your morning routine. Is doing cocaine every morning your routine, Frank?
Yeah.
The first immediate downside is that almost nobody could use the thing, and even the few who could probably sustain it would only be able to do so for a few hours tops, if that. By the sheer insanity of the near magical abilities it has, I'd put it somewhere between Crisis Suits and the Death Dread. It's tough and deadly, it's exposed, but the biggest downside is that even if you survive putting it on, you immediately start a timer for the end times. Next up is one that comes from comic books, which just tells you it's going to be crazy. Not really, I'm going off the MCU version for this. And considering it's a mech suit driven by a guide inside another exosuit, perfect for Warhammer. The Hulkbuster Iron Man suit is one specifically made to counter and hold down Bruce Banner, otherwise known as the strongest Avenger.
I call you the stupid Avenger.
You're tiny Avenger!
What are you, crazy?
Yes!
Capable of knocking the Green Giant and holding up in a fight, the strengths of the Buster armor are really just expanded from the benefits Tony puts into all of his other armor. It's modular, so if it becomes damaged, he can instantly swap out different parts. It's incredibly multifaceted and equipped with everything from grapple hooks to repulsors to missiles and the ability to fly while being surprisingly mobile. Perhaps the closest it comes to from our benchmarks are the melee-focused Brutalis Dreads, as anyone who can take a hit and deal a hit out to the Hulk and still be standing afterwards is certainly going to be able to hold their own against Hellbrutes and Crisis Suits, the very things that other Dreads normally take on. The only things to really take into account are user error and firepower, as we see a big difference of the suit's ability to kick ass when being piloted by Tony compared to Bruce himself. And of course there's the extra bonus that if Tony's in the suit, he's also got a backup regular Iron Man suit underneath. But that paired with an overwhelming force that puts too much strain on the dozen or so arc reactors would be enough to bring it down. So as long as the Hulkbuster can avoid getting shot point blank by the Redemptor's massive plasma cannons, I think it's fair to say it'd have a decent shot at holding its own in a fight. Not dominating every time, just more of a 50-50. Depends who gets the plot armor that day.
I'm sorry.
Now, our next entry are the Armored Cores, or ACs, from Armored Core, the FromSoft mecha game where the exosuits double as metal ninjas. I'll be forthrightfully honest, I'm not big on Armored Core, nor have I played the games, so this is mostly coming from wiki entries and gameplay I've seen secondhand. But for the most part, ACs take all the elements of Titans and Tau battlesuits and combine them into one hyperized killing machine. They're fast, flying and skating around like wasps, adaptable and modular machines with the ability to use and equip a variety of different tools and armor. They're powerful, fitted with both incredible firearms and even capable of powerful melee functionality. Everything that the others had done before, the cores can do just as well, if not better. Their greatest downside, a trade-off made for their incredible speed, is an inability to ward off attacks from heavy weapons like missiles, meaning that while they are very fast, a certainly strong strike would be enough to bring one down. forcing them to rely on dodging and avoiding getting hit in the first place. Truly the Dark Souls of mech suits. Meaning they excel best against targets that are slow-moving and lumbering around, allowing them to maneuver around getting hit. How would they fit on our list? Around the level between our Tau battlesuits and the Redemptors. I could totally see these little buzzers outpacing a Dread or even overwhelming them, especially with the incredible speed and air superiority they have. But if they get struck even once, those odds narrow instantly.
When linked to a Titan, a pilot can only be stopped by overwhelming force, or an equal.
Now, our last entry is an odd one, because it technically violates one of the rules. Titans in Titanfall can be autonomous, but primarily are operated by a pilot who is linked to them. This both makes them deadly as a duo, but also reinforces that the Titans are more effective when being manually driven, so I'll accept it. Now, BT himself is one of the most advanced Titans in the galaxy of Titanfall, being one of the few Vanguard-class Titans made by the militia. He's able to exchange and swap out weapon loadouts and core abilities, is surprisingly fast and capable of complex thought and problem-solving skills. And never forget the sheer amount of emotional damage he's oh so capable of.
I'm not going anywhere.
Copy that, pilot. Protocol 3, protect the pilot.
BT, what are you doing?
Trust me.
And that combined power of both strength, speed, logic, and duality means that not only are the Titans, BT especially, versatile but enormously deadly, able to split on the fly and act as two halves of a whole team. If given the chance, I'm sure BT and Cooper could overwhelm and take down any of the Warhammer suits on this list. Their biggest issue would be being caught up close by the Dread's powerful fist. But that's an issue in Titanfall too. But unlike many of these mech suits, which draw on the user and effectively kill them in the process of being used, the bond between BT and Cooper and their effectiveness in battle only becomes stronger and harder to defeat as they work together more. As for the other Titans on the frontier, that's a sketchier question. But let me know down below what you think your favorite Titan would be like on our little list here. And if you want more about them in 40k, go check out the video I made on Titanfall pitted up against the Tau. And with that, our little micro comparison comes to a close, with our final rankings right about here. It was an interesting thought experiment, and it might be cool to bring in some other similar ideas, comparing snipers or super soldiers, or tanks, or airplanes, or the larger Titans. Let me know what you want to see in the future down below. But also, I love all these mech suits. It's an interesting idea, not just in sci-fi, but in the escalation of war. Not a tank, not an airplane, not a missile, but all in one. A device used and often drawing on their pilot like a leech, literally feeding the fires of war with the blood of poor soldiers sent to their death. The diaspora between the dystopias like Warhammer and Cyberpunk to the more generic sci-fis like Gears and Titanfall, and how they see these tools of war as either a necessary burden or effective platforms, is very astonishing and really just makes me appreciate the mixture of ideas we have going around in general. So, I've talked a lot on this channel about loot-hungry demigods that wield magic powers from a realm beyond realms before, but today, instead of going back down the Destiny route, we're talking about the single most requested topic that's been in the comments of even my non-versus videos. Yes, you've read the title. Yes, you've clicked on the thumbnail. Welcome all you beautiful ladies and animals as we get into the world of Warframe and see how the Tenno stack up against the Astartes of Warhammer 40k, and as a bonus, to the Guardians of Destiny. If you'd like to know more on the other fronts, check out the playlist or the Destiny Supercut up here in the corner, as some things will get a mention without any explanation, but I'm going to try and balance this out, so even if you know less about Destiny, Warhammer, or Warframe, you're hopefully not going to be too lost during all of this. But to start us off, we have to get into the Warframes themselves. And while I'm going to do my best, I'm no expert. I haven't even played a lot of Warframe itself, so take everything I say with a grain of salt, because everything here is coming from a secondary source, whether it be a YouTube lore video, or the wiki, or Reddit threads I've come across in research. But without further ado... In the world of Warframe, the Warframes are effectively, and in far too simple terms, biomechanical exosuits piloted by the player character. A child who's been spirit-touched by the Void, Warframe's own version of a metaphysical magical plane where the rules of physics and reality are done away with, and those intertwined with it become supernatural, like the player character. The Warframes themselves are created by taking someone and juicing them up with a variation of a techno-organic virus called Helldivers. It also fucked up Earth, but that's a separate thing. So at the most basic level, take your low-level soldiers, inject this sci-fi T-virus into them, and boom, Warframe. Well, mostly. Each one is more unique and not so copy-paste, so the methods of creating a Warframe are a lot more nebulous than that. I'm just simplifying it for the sake of this video. But the Warframe alone is not it all. As I mentioned, it's somewhat of a suit for the operator, the child soldier touched by the Void, which works by, well, we don't know. The best I could find is theories about how they really work, but that's not so important for today, as all we really need to know is that the operator is linked ever-presently with the Void, and through the powers of the Void, they can link to a Warframe to remotely pilot it. Now, the piloting is very important because, yes, the operator is just a child, so being able to inhabit the body of a super soldier, space ninja, is what allows them to channel all that Void space magic into a one-man army killing machine. And like I mentioned with their creation, each Warframe is unique. This is a small notion where Warframes are more alike to Astartes than the Guardians, whereas the Guardians can swap between Arc, Void, Stasis, Solar, or any of their other subclasses on a whim. Astartes and Warframes are more specialized. Some are good at using sound, some are more ninja-like, some are tankier, some can eat all of eternity. It just sorta depends from frame to frame. The main constant here is the operator feeding Void energy into the Warframe, and then depending on the frame they're using, you get different effects on the output. Like selecting different options on a hose, all sourced from the same water pipes, but the setting you choose is gonna make a difference between a high power stream or a thick misting. Some Warframes are super Void heavy like Nidus, while others only really use Void powers to power themselves and their high tech, like Vauban. But with almost all of the frames, there's a limiter on them purely because of the operator. You, the player, are not at the height of their power. We have feats from the frames like Grendel supposedly being able to devour the universe, Atlas punching an Earth-destroying asteroid into dust, or Inaros destroying a fleet of nanites with a sandstorm, which might not sound impressive, but think about destroying a huge swath of atomic-scale machines with just the control of sand. Very, very precise sand. But in practice, pulling that off is gonna totally apply based on the strengths of the operator. But powers are only half the equation. Like Guardians, it doesn't matter much if you can free someone in all instances of time at a point if you're getting taken out by small arms fire. Which doesn't even happen for Guardians, but, you know, durability is a major factor here. For Warframes, or more specifically the Operator in all my research and deep dives into the lore that exists, I'm not sure they can die, at least not through physical means. See, you can kill a Warframe, it'd take an immense effort, but they aren't immortal. At the end of the day, the Warframes themselves, while incredibly durable and made of such advanced techno-organic machinery that their creators were tantamount to gods compared to the rest of humanity, but regardless of all that, even if you're strong enough to kill a Warframe, you're just shutting down the suit. The operator within is simply removed, and if you kill the mortal operator, they just return to the void. In comparison to Warhammer 40k, they really just seem to work like demon princes. Even if you kill Angron 1,000 times, he will just go back to the warp and come back later, which makes him a great antagonist for a sci-fi epic that you can use Saturday morning cartoon style. And in the case of the Warframe universe, it works well to empower the protagonist of a sci-fi loot goblin game. Like in Destiny, the rejuvenation and seemingly infinite lives of the operators in-game is canon to the universe. Now, that being said, there are instances of operators or Warframes dying, although this is a messy area. Members of the Grineer have boasted about deaths of hundreds, but whether that's in reference to proper operators or just the Warframes they inhabit, well, it's most likely the latter, as most in the universe aren't even aware of the supernatural element to the Warframes. It's like orcs in the Mordor games, boasting about killing Talion. Like, yeah, you killed him, but he's just gonna come back again, and 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 again, until he just kills you for real. Now, for the actual deaths of operators, it seems to be a purely supernatural thing. The only deaths we know of are of operators transferring their consciousness into the Warframe itself. Then once the frame dies, they go with it, unable to separate themselves. This was the threat of the player character in the beginning of Warframe, who thought they were the frame before finding out it was a second body. If they died without knowing, they very well could have just died for good. The other main way for an operator to die is to die mentally. In some cases, like Rel, an operator who controlled the Warframe Harrow, which basically spent 1,000 years holding back the Man in the Wall. I don't have time to get into it today, but essentially the Man in the Wall, Wally, is a manifestation of the indifference, or in other words, the void, to the minds of those who converse with it. Think like the Chaos Gods or the Traveler, a subservient idea to the concepts of a thing so unknowable that to look upon it would drive you mad, a truly eldritch monster. Harrow, and by extension Rel, held that thing back, trapped it for 1,000 years, but only died, quote-unquote, when the player arrived to symbolically carry the torch to continue on that mission, relieving Rel of that duty, and their essence just sort of passes away. Now that said, it's not even 100% confirmed that Rel died, just that he's kind of given up. He's exhausted. I mean, trying to sit in a room holding down Tzeentch or the Witness from walking out the door for 1,000 years? That's in essence what he was up to. I'd want to clock out forever after that too. But either because it's impossible due to the paradoxical and magical bullcrap nature of the void, or because the writing team on Warframe just haven't come up with any concrete answers yet, there doesn't seem to be a clear answer on if Warframes or their operators can permanently die, or at least a way to do so consistently. For most frames, dying just makes them stronger. One gets exploded so hard he's split into pieces across the soul system, but you're able to rebuild him and use it regardless. For the operators, I can't really say for sure, but there are worse fates than death, and that is where the strongest tools against them come into play. Because while physically and even magically it seems like you wouldn't be able to kill an operator, you could break them. We see this at the beginning of Warframe, where Vor places a mind control device on you which threatens to effectively trap your consciousness within the Warframe forever, at least as long as the device is active. And in the same vein as Rel walking away from the fight, you could see an operator trapped within their own mind, basically facing the death of self forever in their own personal hell they could never escape from, trapped in an endless facade, the mind death of an operator never truly dying, but locked away with no key in sight. Now, if we're comparing the Warframes to Guardians and the Astartes, well, it depends on who, what, and where. Taking the most extreme examples, we'd be looking for the Guardian and the Operator, the player characters from Destiny and Warframe respectively. And for the Astartes, well, I'm not sure of many who could stack up against them that are within the ranks of the super soldiers in the 41st millennium. As we've gone over before, to kill a Guardian you need to kill their ghost, something that can only be done by paracausal forces. Paracausal simply meaning above reality, or reality-defying powers, or powers from another reality, as that's what the light is in its most basic form, something that breaks free from the normal cause and effect of a mathematical universe. Regular Astartes, like Titus or even Malam Kaido, sons of Gilliman, don't stand a chance against either of these. No amount of bolter fire will keep a ghost down for good, and as we just went over, you need some incredibly contrived space magic psychological warfare to lock away the Warframes. The most simple example would be a Grey Knight or any librarian, but you'd need an incredibly powerful psyker to contain a Warframe, doubly so to stop a Guardian whose powers won't see them consumed by a Demon Lord if used incorrectly, as we often see with the psykers of 40k. Among the ranks of the Imperium, I don't think any of their psykers or battalions are sentencing a Warframe to permanent self-death with the exception of the God Emperor. Space magic voodoo isn't really their specialty, especially when compared to other factions in the 40k universe, like of course, Chaos. If trapped in the warp, it's much more likely the Warframes could be getting thrown around in a mental prison that tugs them around. But it really depends on if they have the powers of a frame like Harrow, which has held back Warframe's own equivalent of the warp, not Chaos Gods, but the nebulous soup of the warp, or in Warframe's case, the Void, single-handedly. In Warhammer, this would be equivalent to closing the Eye of Terror single-handedly and keeping it shut for 1,000 years. Now, how long could Harrow keep that up? Well, it seems to be that it's up to the actual soul and willpower of the frame themselves, but there's no indication that Rel was about to lose it. He just had no reason to continue on once the player character arrived to take over. So Astartes, the Imperium of Man. Yeah, Grendel might just slurp up the Milky Way before anyone knows what's going on. But what about Guardians? Could the Paragons of Light kill an operator with their own flavor of space magic? Well, I don't think they would. They both represent the same ideas. The whole point of the light, of the Guardians and their transcendence in the final shape is about choice, the free will and choosing to fight for every other creature's ability to choose, unlike the xenophobic Imperium that would attack the Tenno for having an AI-operated spaceship. The Guardians accept the Elensky, the Cabal, the Hive, and would probably take on Vex allies if they weren't so fundamentally opposed. The Warframes are much the same. They were created at the behest of another empire. They've only ever been used as tools. In the Tenno, they've been given more than that. Not weapons, not child soldiers, but children of the Lotus who are free to protect the Sol System on their own accord. Very much so. The Tenno and the Guardians are one and the same. If anything, they just team up, and you get super hyper-powered video game protagonists working with more hyper-powered video game protagonists. And as we all know, being the protagonist of a video game really is the most powerful ability here. Outside of the Chaos Gods themselves, and likely Big E, I don't think there's a single entity in 40k that can hold back the Guardian Vanguard or Operators of the Lotus forever. So yeah, that's it. That's the video. I did Warframe now. I'm free. The 40k versus series is over. It's done. It's fading away. It's flying by. Ooh. Soldiers of the light, wielding all manner of elemental powers channeled through a force beyond the realms of reality. And the Tenno, children turned soldiers, their souls maintained and locked in everlasting service to the universe. Combine the two, and you get a force nigh unstoppable. Welcome all you beautiful ladies and animals, as today we follow up on the Tenno and Guardians looking for exactly what would happen if they happened, looking for exactly what would happen, motherfucking piece of shit, who wrote this script, dude? Looking for exactly what would happen if they conjoined into a single faction of high-powered loot-seeking demigods and what could stop them, if anything. If you haven't seen the episode before this, check it out. I went over the Warframes, Destiny's Guardians, and even Space Marines from Warhammer 40k, comparing them all to each other. Now, a lot of people said it was a cop-out that I speculated on how the Guardians and Tenno would join forces rather than fighting, and well, I mainly did that to show how these factions operate, but also I thought it was obvious. Off rip, we know what it takes to kill a Guardian, whereas we only have glimpses of what might maybe kill a Tenno. It's not something I felt like I needed to explain. But for the record, straight out, if they had to battle, I'd give it to the Tenno. But today, we're not here to rehash that. If you want the battles, go check out that first voyage, and subscribe to the channel so you're here for all future videos as well. But without further delay, let's examine these gods of avarice and see just what would happen if their powers combined. First up is whether or not a Guardian, someone blessed with the light and capable of harnessing the darkness, could manipulate the Void, a transcendent plane of existence that runs parallel with reality akin to the Ascendant Plane in Destiny. A place made real by its connection to the darkness, carved out by these insane powers, intangibly connected to the fundamental building blocks of reality. But the Void, while similar, is not one for one with the darkness. The darkness is the opposite of the light. It's a metaphysical insertion of will over the natural world, where the light is this incalculable power from outside the universe enforcing itself over it, going around the regular cause and effect of the realms, making it paracausal. The Void is simply the Void. It has no opposite, it has no equal, but it has a voice. The first scientists looked upon the great indifference with fear, and that fear was made manifest. The man in the wall, an eldritch god of time, unbound and of powers unknown. Through him and the acts of indifference is how the Tenno achieved their powers, being sapped in the Void. Dampened by its influence, the children of an empire collapsing sent aboard a spaceship that would be lost in the Void. Through this thing that saw them, the Tenno were given their powers, and through the Warframes, they could channel and control them until they learned later to master the same powers. If a Guardian wanted to use the Void, they'd need to give a bit of them to it. But is that even possible? In essence, it would be like Guardians signing up to become Taken, which we see that the Traveler will straight up destroy its own ghosts rather than letting them fall to the clutches of another entity, as that goes against the goals of the Traveler, of the Gardener. Life is a thing to be protected. The Guardian is that protection made manifest, weaponized. But life is not freely given. Life can still end, it can still be fraught with pain and suffering, because without that loss, without that pain, you end up with nothing but greed and hunger. An avarice for power unchecked by demigods who would never die, blandly standing in opposition to the natural flow of the galaxy forevermore. The Traveler, the light, would not want that. It could not allow that. And in that same way that no Guardian could absorb so much power of the light to restore their ghosts or fall to the Taken to be used as an endless machine of war, a Guardian absorbing the Void to use as a weapon, especially as those linked to the Void cannot be killed, instead being endlessly recycled through the many paradoxes that keep the Tenno alive, is something that the Traveler could never stand for. Could a Guardian take on the powers of the Void? Sure, theoretically. We're talking space magic. The rules are not written and change from expansion to expansion as the writers figure it out. But would they? I don't think so. At least not while connected to the light. Guardians who have lost their connection like Osiris or Zavala? Possibly, yeah, they could. But they're not going to be double dipping into both overpowered wells at the same time. The demons of the light are powerful, but only so much, as the separation of powers is what keeps the universe in balance rather than trading one tyrant for another. Now into the inverse, can a Tenno, or even just an ordinary Warframe, come to the light? The Warframes are still people themselves. While heavily modified and mutated beyond recognition, they are still alive, living exosuits that the Tenno, the void-touched children, use to harness and channel their powers through. But not all frames have a Tenno to pilot them, and a good number are still capable of moving on their own, and of course, dying. While a Tenno guides the Warframe and the frame's own skills allow the Tenno to carry out their missions in the solar system, the Warframes are still individuals on their own. But to what extent is going to depend from frame to frame. Some seem to be little more than mindless animals moving on instinct and self-preservation alone without the guidance of the Tenno. Others are more independent, capable of tasks and even complex jobs on their own, depending on when in the timeline a Warframe was forged. Those that came later, towards the end of the Great War they were designed for, came out cleaner, more whole. At least in comparison to their elder brethren, whose humanity has been stripped out entirely. Could the less sapient of the Warframes become Guardians after death? Could any of them? It depends. As the Guardians are not chosen by the Traveler at random, nor by divine intervention, but rather by their ghost. And while they may disagree or hold contentions, each ghost contains the power to decide for themselves whether or not to revive their Guardian. Examples in the lore point to ghosts who thought they were reviving a member of the Fallen, struggling with the quandary before deciding to go through with it. The Hive ghosts, who were tricked into it, still chose and continued to revive Hive warriors from death. And older ghosts from the age before the Vanguard, when some of the earliest Guardians ruled Earth as savage warlords who slaughtered thousands with their newfound power. While most were dealt with by the Iron Lords like Saladin, some few others were just denied revival by their ghosts, who withheld the healing process from their masters. So in the end, it's up to a ghost whether or not they'll choose to revive a Guardian. Whether they're human, an alien, a warmonger, or a criminal. That choice falls upon the ghost. And what we've seen of the possible Guardians in Destiny, yes, the Warframes could be revived by a ghost and turned into a hyper-powered, also unkillable super soldier with powers not derived of the void, but of the light. Although I think without the calming effect of the Tenno, any light-touched Warframes would go down the path of warmongering lords, empowered by the light, or even end up getting corrupted by the darkness. A Guardian is already dangerous. Now turn them into a super soldier who can dodge bullets and fly around like a super sci-fi ninja, but now they can also thunder crash. But what of the Tenno, the void-touched children? Well, let me read out the Guardian's mantra given to us by the speaker of the Traveler. Devotion inspires bravery. Bravery inspires sacrifice. Sacrifice leads to death.
So, feel free to kill yourself.
One of the foundational things for Guardians is the death part. This is where the Traveler bestows them with selective amnesia to guise them into supporting the cause of the light, unburdened by any previously held convictions. Not only are the Tenno not dead, but it's like mathematically impossible for them to die. So while the Warframes on their own could die and hold the light, the Tenno could not. But they could still use transference, or the psychic meta-link that allows the Tenno to inhabit the Warframe's body and calm their mind, becoming a Guardian enhanced by the Void, going around the loopholes and forcing the connection to work. Now, could the Ghost refuse to revive a Warframe for fear of its strength? Yes. Could it rationalize the control of the Tenno and decide it's for the greater good for both of them to work together? Also yes, but if they became too powerful, it may become the case that the Traveler personally steps in, taking away the light from this absolutely overpowered space ninja. But if they are allowed, you have one being that can control the light, solar, arc, and void, and is also connected to the void of Warframe. has the physical skill and ability of the frame itself, and with the Tenno leading charge, could even harness the abilities of the Darkness in Stasis and Strand. Basically, the best of both worlds between the universes of Destiny and Warframe. A nigh unkillable, unstoppable, unrelenting force of positivity acting on the universe like a biblically accurate anime angel. There's a lot of different options to go from here, so I won't be breaking down the specifics, but if there's any Warframe/Destiny class combos you think would be exceptionally interesting or powerful to see, let me know down below. If combined, you've effectively just buffed up the Warframe side of the Tenno equation. Frames are already incredibly strong, but even within their own universe, still die from time to time. Now, with a Ghost, we've just made that process even harder. So if to kill a Tenno you first need to take out their frame, now you need to kill the Ghost, something that can only be done with the paracausal forces of light and darkness. Like a bullet empowered by the dark, fists empowered by the light, or the mastery of the dark by the witness. And only then, you've only killed a single frame and still have to deal with the Tenno, which, as I talked about in the previous episode, is practically impossible. As the Tenno are intrinsically linked to the Void, the only way to get rid of them for good would be to kill the Void, an entire dimension of reality. So at the scale of the beings we tend to see in Warframe and Destiny, there's no single entity that could kill one of these light-touched Warframes and their Tenno for good, even if they're cut off from the light. But as always, that's it for today, and let me know what you think of the collaboration between the light and the Tenno and what you think it would look like down below. Big thank you to all the members and patrons who help me continue to make new videos. If you're unaware, you can become a member for just $1 a month and get access to member-exclusive polls to vote for which videos come first, get videos early, and more behind the scenes. And go to the links below to grab some of my charity merch. 100% of the proceeds I make from this gets donated directly to my local food bank. As always, stay cool, have fun, and be awesome. Buster out.